Welcome back to Quick Bits. This week we have a lot to talk about with Karen Reed, but also the Los Angeles County Superior Court system getting hacked, and a few of the Rust jurors speak out, and there's a few Logan Paul lawsuits we need to talk about. One of them is Olympic themed. And to get through all of that, let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. First, in somewhat unprecedented news for the County of Los Angeles, the entirety of the court system was shut down due to a ransomware attack. They were closed on Monday and reopened with ongoing disruptions. And they are not the only county in California that's been impacted, and California is not the only state that's been impacted from these attacks that happened over the weekend of July 20th and 21st, prompting that closure on July 23rd. Those ransomware attacks are not the first of their kind on court systems and court systems within the US, as they are going to digital filing, going to digital files, have continued to have issues with ransomware attacks, shutting down not just very large counties, but also entire state systems. So when I complain about nothing being online and available for the Karen Reed case in Massachusetts, maybe it's to their benefit when we're seeing what other court systems are struggling with. And one of the things court systems couldn't keep up with in Los Angeles and other impacted counties were dealing with their jurors. But we've heard how the Rust case dealt with their jurors and letting them know that their service was no longer needed. Two of the Rust jurors spoke to the New York Times and indicated and confirmed that they received a text message that said trail canceled. Yes, trial was spelled trail. Trail canceled. And that's all the notification they received. I am so surprised that there wasn't a phone call. There wasn't a thank you for your service, it's no longer needed. There was not a this case is resolved. Nothing. A text message that just said trail canceled. And both the jurors that spoke up indicated that where they were in the trial 2 days in, they weren't quite sure why the case had been brought. And it's refreshing to see jurors that have come into a case with an open mind and said, look, the prosecution haven't proven to us yet why we're here. And given where the case ended when it was dismissed, I'm not surprised by that. They were in the very early stages of that trial. And I'm not surprised by that because they were just in the very early stages of that trial. And stuff that probably won't go to trial. You might not be familiar with content creator and WWE wrestler Logan Paul, but you might be familiar with a drink that he made with fellow YouTube creator KSI called Prime Energy. Prime Energy is currently being sued by the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee for their Kevin Durant collab. That collab refers to Kevin Durant as an Olympian. It talks about the Olympics, it talks about going for gold, and it talks about Team USA, all things that are protected not only by congressional statute, but also by trademark. So the US Olympic Committee is not having any of this Prime collab, but we do know that Prime Energy is valued over $1 billion. So there is a company that probably has the money to fight back, but is still not going to win. I imagine that this will resolve quickly and that Prime will be paying the US Olympic Committee and that this collab will not be allowed to be sold anymore. Remember, Coca-Cola is the official drink sponsor of the Olympics, which means not only have Logan Paul and KSI with their Prime Energy drink potentially pissed off one of the largest companies in their space by tangling with Coca-Cola's proprietary rights over being the official drink sponsor of the Olympics, but they've also gotten their company sued in federal court. I can't imagine that they didn't vet this collab through a bunch of lawyers and maybe they decided that the publicity that it would bring was worth it and that they would rather pay in the lawsuit than ask permission and be told no, because it's a very clear no, given Coca-Cola's standing as the longtime and sole sponsor of drinks for the Olympics. But that's not the only Logan Paul lawsuit we talked about last week. When talking about lawsuits between content creators, Logan Paul is suing content creator Coffeezilla, who does deep dive investigative videos, mostly in the crypto space. explaining crypto controversies, and breaking down what he investigates in the blockchain, in addition to interviewing folks, getting documents from companies, and really did a very thorough deep dive into everything that was going on with FTX and their founder, Sam Bankman Fried, who is now in prison for all of what went on with relation to FTX and its wild collapse. But I've learned personally quite a lot from Coffeezilla's videos about crypto, blockchain technologies, and the way people are carrying out kind of age-old frauds using new technology. And all of a sudden, people think it's new again. It's like a Ponzi scheme is a Ponzi scheme, folks. But that's beside the point. In this lawsuit, Logan Paul is suing over his ill-fated crypto game, CryptoZoo. And I broke down the entirety of this lawsuit. It is a extensive lawsuit, and most of it is just self-congratulatory on the part of Logan Paul, talking about how he has redeemed himself and his reputation, how he knows the value of his reputation, how CryptoZoo was meant to be a fun game that also rewarded in cryptocurrencies, but his intention was never to defraud anyone. The lawsuit also does point out, though, that two of the folks hired by Logan Paul to build this crypto investment game were con men. They call them con men in the lawsuit and talk about the fact that they took over $8 million out of the CryptoZoo token at the beginning of this. Logan Paul is currently suing them. Why he's choosing to sue Coffeezilla, the person who brought all of this to light on YouTube? Well, in the lawsuit, they say it's because Coffeezilla calling CryptoZoo a scam, or referring to it as Logan Paul's biggest scam, is defamatory. Well, courts have often found the word scam to be opinion, so it's a long uphill battle, but it seems that Coffeezilla's lawyers are indicating that there will be a countersuit here. So this YouTube-based lawsuit is not going to go away anytime soon. And having courts evaluate what is defamatory and what is not is something that I always keep an eye on, because it is an area of law, though the law is old, that continues to be used in new ways. And I am covering a couple different defamation suits at the moment on the channel, like the TikTok psychic defamation suit, which just goes to show that even when there is what I consider to be very clear defamation, calling someone a murderer when there is no evidence that they have done such, is clearly within the scope of defamation per se, accusing people of crimes. Even there, that lawsuit is now well over a year in. And yes, the plaintiff in that case, a University of Idaho professor, has sued and has even won on the question of liability. And this lawsuit is still far from done. There still needs to be a trial on the amount of damages. And then once the damages are determined, there is still the ongoing fight to A, stop the defendant from saying the things that they've said, and B, then try to recover. It's a very difficult process, even when you are clearly and resoundingly in the right, as the professor is in the TikTok lawsuit. But that's the same if you're being sued for something that isn't defamatory. These lawsuits can be very expensive and can take years. And I wonder if that's the point here. And speaking of cases that are going to take some time, let's talk about Karen Reed. On Monday, July 22nd, the court held a very brief scheduling hearing and set August 9th as the day for oral argument in the defense's motion to dismiss. In that motion, the defense is arguing that since jurors have come forward stating that they unanimously found Karen Reed not guilty of counts 1 and 3, but they weren't sure how to write it on the verdict forms, and then the judge never asked them and they didn't know what to do, the defense is arguing that the court must dismiss those counts to prevent Karen Reed from being retried on those counts in violation of double jeopardy, saying that she has been acquitted of those counts, or at least the intention was there to acquit, and therefore the court must dismiss those cases. The defense has a legally very difficult uphill battle in this. Of course, prosecutors can choose to dismiss counts 1 and 3 if it's clearly against the will of that seated jury. The defense also wants the court to allow jurors to be polled in some way, but we now have a juror filing an affidavit indicating that they are very concerned about potential harassment should their names get out, and they are concerned for their safety because of how contentious this case remains online. It's a reminder that even though these cases sometimes are contentious, that there have to be boundaries with how people engage, because jurors looking at this now want nothing to do with it. And the juror that filed that anonymous affidavit in court was very clear that they weren't worried about one side of the issue of Karen Reed's guilt or innocence or the other. They were worried about everyone. So I wonder if that affidavit is going to give the court even further pause about doing anything like asking for juror affidavits or questioning them on this issue. And during the sentencing hearing, the court indicated that no matter what they ruled, that they believed it would probably go up on appeal, which based on everything we've seen, I think is correct. And the court went ahead and set a trial date for January 27th, 2025. There is like a 1-year clock on this from the time the mistrial was declared to the time this is retried. And I don't know if this will actually get retried in January of 2025. It's really going to depend on where we go from here, what happens in appeals, and what the state of the prosecution's case looks like by the time we get to 2025. Because, well, there's more law enforcement under investigation. Thank you to today's sponsor, Thrive Causemetics. Thrive Causemetics has launched their incredible Empower Matte Precision Lipstick Crayon. I have talked at length about all of the Thrive Causemetics products that I love because they are easy and they wash off easily. And the Empower Matte is no different. It stays put, it doesn't dry down on the lips, and it is incredibly lightweight. So in all of the talking I do, it has been a fantastic option to leave me with a colorful lip that is easy. And that is one of the things I love most about Thrive Causemetics. Thrive Causemetics is beauty that gives back, with a percentage of every purchase going to their nearly 300 giving partners. And right now you get an exclusive 10% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/lawnerd. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/lawnerd for 10% off your first order. Let's get back to today's episode. Massachusetts State Police confirmed to Boston 10 on Tuesday, July 23rd, that state troopers Yuri Buchanan and Brian Tully are both under internal affairs investigations. Is this surprising, seeing everything that's fallen out from the investigations with State Trooper Michael Proctor? No. Buchanan and Tully were both supervisors of the lead investigator in this case, Michael Proctor. They were both on some of those group texts, which are the subject of Michael Proctor's now suspension without pay and being relieved of duty. He is still working through the due process that is owed to him when state police investigates whether these are the types of things that get someone fired and whether he will be fired. There is process for all of that. Would it be surprising to me if we saw Michael Proctor fired by state police? No, it won't. But sometimes when there are terminations, especially in high-profile cases, you can also see people turn around and sue the agency that has terminated them. So I think that they are probably going through every avenue of due process before reaching that conclusion, if that is the conclusion that state police do reach. So am I surprised that Brian Tully and Yuri Buchanan are under investigation? No, I'm not, especially because they were on all those text messages. But where does this leave the prosecution's case if most of the state troopers who are your witnesses have been are subject to internal affairs investigations because of behavior related to this case and this investigation? And the FBI investigation is still ongoing. So what is this case even going to look like by the time we get to January of 2025? And what does this mean for other cases that these troopers have been involved in? It's fallout that we are going to continue to see, and I will continue talking about, because there are some other high-profile cases that are going to get mixed into all of this. And finally, on the podcast last week, I broke down the information we have from jurors because one of the Karen Reed jurors had spoken up, indicating that the jurors were actually leaning 9-3 for guilt on one of the lesser includeds from count 2. In that case, count 1 was the intentional second-degree homicide. Count 3 was the hit and run causing death and leaving the scene causing death. And count 2 was the DUI-related homicide with those lesser includeds. Those lesser includeds all have a different level of intent of action for Karen Reed. Counts 1 and 3 are quite different in that for count 1, Karen Reed had to intend to hit the victim with the car and then do such. In count 3, she had to know that she hit John O'Keefe with her car and then choose to leave. And in count 2 in the lesser included, there are jury instructions that go to the chain of events and whether she was a part of that chain, and without her action, would the victim have ended up dead. So I'm not surprised that the jury got hung up there because it can be very confusing in the jury instructions, and those elements weren't described well for them. It took the court almost 30 minutes to instruct the jury on all of the subparts of count 2, including those lesser included. So, if you want a breakdown of where this jury might have gotten stuck debating count 2 and how they got closer to guilt on those lesser included, then they clearly did on counts 1 and 3, where they said they reached unanimous not guilty verdicts. You can find that in the audio feed. And as always, the podcast is listed in the Law Nerd app. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm covering, that's where to find it. The Law Nerd app is a free download for iOS and Android. And with that, hopefully the quick bits helped you stay up to date with everything I'm covering. And I will see you, well, in the chat for our Tuesday and Thursday live streams. I'll see you soon. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.